Welcome all of you, Virtual Classes YouTube channel. In this video lecture, we will discuss about the detail of vitamin D, like chemistry of vitamin D, biological functions, RDA value, deficiency, hypervitaminosis, metabolism, and absorptions of vitamin D. Like vitamin A, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. Vitamin D structure and functions is resemble to the steroid, and vitamin D is first isolated by the Angus in 1931, and he named the vitamin D is calciferol. Vitamin D is also known as a sunshine vitamin. Now we will discussing about the chemistry of vitamin D. Vitamin D is present in both plant and animals in the provitamin form, and this provitamin form is referred as D2 and D2 form. In plant, the provitamin form is called vitamin D2 and chemically is known as ergocalciferol, and this ergocalciferol is formed by the ergosterol by the UV radiations, while in animals the provitamin form is vitamin D3, and vitamin D3 is chemically is known as cholecalciferol, while activated form of vitamin D is known as calciferol. Now we will discussing about the metabolism and biological functions of vitamin D. In the human skin, during the synthesis of cholesterol, the 7-dehydrocholesterol is formed, and these 7-dehydrocholesterol is changed into the cholecalciferol with the help of in the presence of sunlight. We can say that the UV light change the 7-dehydrocholesterol into the cholecalciferol, that is a provitamin form in animals, that is known as vitamin D3, and the vitamin D3, that is cholecalciferol, then move into the liver, and the liver contain a enzyme that is 25 hydroxylase enzyme. These 25 hydroxylase enzyme convert the cholecalciferol into the 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol, because they add the hydroxyl group at the 25th carbon of the cholecalciferol and convert the cholecalciferol into the 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol. Then the 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol move into the kidney, and the kidney also contain a hydrolase enzyme, that is a 1 hydrolase enzyme. These 1 hydrolase enzyme can add the hydroxyl group into first position of hydroxy cholecalciferol, and the convert the 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol into the 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol, and it is a active form of vitamin D, and it is also known as a calcitrope. This reaction, it is also stimulated by the PTH hormone, parathyroid hormones, as well as low phosphate concentrations in plasma. After the activations of vitamin D3, that is 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol, it acts on the 3 sides. First one in kidney. In kidney, they increase the absorption of calcium and phosphorus, and in bone, this calcitrol increase the calcium absorptions and help in the bone formations, while third site of target site is intestine, and in intestine the cholecalciferol act as a hormone. The cholesterol receptors are present inside the intestine. After the binding the calcitrol on their receptors, they form the receptor complex that is known as calcitrol receptor complex. After the making of the calcitrol receptor complex, they bind the genome of the cells. After the binding of the genome, they start the transcriptions and form the messenger RNA. After this messenger RNA undergo the process of central dogma, undergo the translation process, and form the specific calcium binding protein, and these calcium binding protein increase the calcium ion absorption. The proteins bind the calcium and increase the absorptions of calcium from the lumen of the intestine, and ultimately the plasma calcium ion concentration is increased. So we can say that the kidney and intestine and bone are the target organ of the vitamin D, and ultimately the vitamin D increase the calcium and phosphorus absorptions. We can say, in summary, the decreased plasma calcium concentration in the blood stimulate the parathyroid gland. The stimulated parathyroid hormones, after the sensing of the decreased plasma calcium concentration, they secrete the parathyroid hormone. We can say that PTH hormone, and these PTH hormone act on the renal reabsorption. These secreted PTH hormone act on the bone and increase the calcium ion mobilizations that increase the plasma calcium concentration, and it also act on the kidney that increase the renal calcium ion absorption. Ultimately, that also increase the plasma calcium concentration, and PTH hormone also activate the vitamin D3, that is calcitrol, and after the activations of the calcitrol, it also act on the bones and renal calcium ion reabsorptions. Calcitrol also act on the intestine and ultimately increase the calcium ion absorption by the forming CBP protein, that is calcium binding protein. Now we're discussing the biochemical functions of vitamin D3. The biologically active form of vitamin D is calcitrol, that is 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol, and these calcitrol hormone regulate the plasma calcium and phosphate ion concentrations, and these calcitrol vitamin act on the intestine, kidney, and bone, and ultimately maintain the plasma calcium ion concentration. And the plasma calcium normal concentration is 9 to 11 mg per deciliters. First, in intestine, they act and increase the intestinal absorption of the calcium and phosphate. In bone, it also acts on the osteoblast cells of the bone. In bone, two types of cells are present. First one is osteoblast cells. Then second is osteoclast cells. The osteoblast cells help in the formation of the bone, while osteoclast cells release the calcium ion from the bones. The osteoblast cells activated by the calcitrol hormones and increase the uptake of calcium ion. That means deposition of calcium phosphate in the bone. That's why we can say the calcitrol or vitamin D help in the formation of the bones. And it also acts on the kidney. And kidney, the calcitrol involved in the minimizing excretions of the calcium and phosphate through the kidney and increase the reabsorptions of the calcium and phosphorus ion. Now we can discuss vitamin D is a hormone and not a vitamin. Justifications. Vitamin D is act as a hormone, not a vitamin. It is explained by various characteristics of vitamin D as resemble to the hormones. In calcitrol is considered as an important calcitrophic hormone, and the is prohormone, that is cholecalciferol. It acts as a prohormone. Following characteristics are justified. Vitamin D is a hormone. First characteristic, vitamin D is synthesized in the skin by the UV radiations like hormone, secreted by a separate gland and acted on the different target organ. Like that hormone, vitamin D3 is synthesized in the skin by the radiations of UV radiations that produced by the sunlight, and its active form is synthesized in kidney, that is calcitrol, and these calcitrol target organs are intestine, bone, and kidney, where it specifically acts. And the action of the calcitrol are similar to the steroid hormone. Like steroid hormones, receptors are present in the cytosols or either inside the nucleus. Like that, calcitrol receptors are present inside the cytosol, and these calcitrol stimulate the DNA to produce a calcium binding protein. That these calcium binding protein increase the absorption of calcium ion from the intestine. Another characteristic, the vitamin D is inhibit activity or action emanated by the actinomycin D. the actinomycin D inhibit the transcription process. After the treatment of actinomycin D, the RNA synthesis is stopped. That clearly shows that the calcitriol hormones produce a calcium binding protein like that hormones. Next, another characteristic, cholesterol synthesis is self-regulated by the feedback mechanism. There are two types of feedback mechanism. First one is positive feedback mechanism and second one is negative feedback mechanism. In the feedback mechanism, the molecules or chemicals control own concentration, self concentration. It may increase their own concentration. It's called a positive feedback mechanism. If a molecules or chemicals decrease their own concentrations, that is called negative feedback mechanism. The calcitriol regulate own self-regulate feedback mechanism. They decrease their amount by own synthesis. So all these characteristics represent that vitamin D is a hormone, not a vitamin. Now we're discussing the recommended dietary allowance, that is RDA. The daily requirement of vitamin D is 400 international unit or 10 mg of cholecalciferol. But in countries there where good sunlight present, like India, the RDA of vitamin D is reduced to half, is 200 international unit or 5 mg cholecalciferol. Now we're discussing about the dietary source of vitamin D. The good source of vitamin D include fatty fish, fish liver oil, egg yolk, etc. But milk is not a good source of vitamin D, and vitamin D is provided in the body three ways. First one is exposure of sunlight from the synthesis of vitamin D. Second one is consumption of natural food that contain vitamin D. And third, by irradiating food like yeast that contain precursors of vitamin D, and fortification of food like milk, butter, etc. that also contain the vitamin D. Now we're discussing the deficiency symptom of vitamin D. If less amount of vitamin D are less than the RDA value present in the diet, that cause deficiency symptoms. Vitamin D deficiency is relatively less common. However, insufficient exposure of sunlight in area where sunlight exposure is very less, that means that person's diet vitamin D is deficiency, and deficiency of vitamin D cause rickets in the children, while in adults they cause osteomalacia. Osteo means bone and malacia means soft. In that person where vitamin D deficiency in their diet in adults, they cause osteomalacia. That symptoms represent their bones are soft, while in case of children the deficiency of vitamin D is known as rickets. Now we're discussing about the hypervitaminosis of D. Like vitamin A, vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. That's why the vitamin D is stored in mostly in the liver and slowly metabolized, and hyper dose or high dose of vitamin D cause toxic effect. Among the all fat soluble vitamins, the vitamin D is most toxic overdose. Effect of hypervitaminosis includes demineralization of bones, that means reabsorptions, and increased absorptions of calcium ion from the intestine that leads the increased calcium plasma level, that is known as hypercalcemia. If any person's hypervitaminosis D occur, that means their body renal reabsorptions of calcium ion increase, and the increased calcium ion increase the calcium concentrations in the plasma, that is known as hypercalcemia. And vitamin D hypervitaminosis also leads to the formation of the stones in the kidney, that is known as renal calcification. And if persons high consumptions of vitamin D associated in the loss of appetite, nausea, increased thirst, and loss of waste. It is the detailed discussion of vitamin D. We discuss all the aspects of the vitamin D. If you like this video, please subscribe the YouTube channel for future upcoming videos. Thank you.